What's up, playback? And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Deeper Dive. It is Tuesday, October 29th. I am Josh Engleman. We gave Spags the boot for today. DK is back in the hot seat. I'm excited about it. We've got another 4-game slate to break down. Feels a lot like last Tuesday, just instead of 4 teams, it's 4 games. So hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Follow us both on Twitter. You will find our Twitter handles below our bodies. DK, what's up?
Not much. Setting up to be, I think it's a pretty interesting tournament slate. It's 4-gamer. I think the key obviously is going to be to try to figure out the Golden State rotation and what Steve Kerr is going to do. I think there's like so many different ways that could go, but I'm excited to talk about it with you and see what your thoughts are too.
Yeah, that is a bit of a wild card game, is it not?
Yep.
Because they've been running a 12-man rotation. 2 of the guys in that rotation aren't there. And I'm not totally confident Steve Kerr doesn't continue to run a 12-man rotation. So I don't trust anything that he's going to do tonight. And I hate it. Of course, that game's at 10 o'clock. It's just brutal. At least for late swap purposes, we're all going to be largely overexposed to Golden State. So like moving shit around at 8:30 and 9:30 isn't going to be all that problematic. But ugh, I'm not looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Utah's not much better, honestly.
Yeah, even trying to figure out what the starting lineup's going to be. I'm like, this could go so many different ways too. So, yeah.
I definitely don't have that like locked in at all. So we'll
neither.
definitely get to that. It'll be the last thing we talk about. But we'll start it off now. Denver Nuggets, 4.5-point favorites in Brooklyn, 219 total. So nothing too weird for the Nuggets, other than the fact that they're on a back-to-back. Like, everybody that's normally available is available for Denver. We've got 30% ownership coming into Jokic across both sites. 10 for Murray on DK, 20 on FanDuel. 10 for Porter on FanDuel, 20 for him on DK. Kind of 10 for Gordon on DraftKings, 20 on FanDuel. So these guys are waffling back and forth. 10% for Christian Brown on FanDuel and 31 on DraftKings because he is priced in an incredibly stupid manner. What an obvious chalk play that is clearly going to bust tonight, even though I'm well over the field on him. Let's talk about Denver, though. What do you like?
Yeah, so Denver played, this is the second end of a back-to-back, and they played an overtime game last night. So Denver's been running a pretty tight rotation. I do think there's a chance that, Malone could extend the bench a little bit in this game. So I just want to mention that. But Jokic coming in 11.3K, again, around 30% ownership. I think I would not be surprised that ownership goes up a bit just because of all the value that we have with Golden State. A couple other value plays we'll mention as well. So, yeah, I think Jokic looks great there. Ownership's not crazy. Christian Brown getting a good amount of love. I totally understand why, right? He's got shooting guard, small forward eligibility. He's at a very secure role with his team. He should play 30+ minutes, so no issue with that. Again, MPJ, Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, all getting a little bit of love. I do think that the ownership of Jamal Murray is a little bit interesting. Not as high as I thought it would be, especially with him being a pretty popular play yesterday. He did not shoot well. Still got there because of overtime. It's still a decent game because of overtime, but I think the ownership is a little bit low there on Jamal Murray. And then I wanted to mention Julian Strawther's kind of just like a contrarian play off the bench, currently projected for basically no ownership. Again, has nice eligibility, played 22 minutes last game. If Malone does extend the bench a bit, I think that they could lean on Strawther a little bit more. So, I don't think he's an optimal play by any means, but maybe an interesting pivot there in tournaments off of some of the Golden State Warriors chalk.
Yeah, I don't hate that Strawther shout. Shooting guard, small forward, eligible, 3,700. Like, there's a lot of flexibility there if you want to try to grab a different value play. It's only a 4-game slate, so like somebody like that is going to be good today that we're not thinking about. And Strawther is definitely a guy that can step into a bigger role for Denver. All right, chat, I'm going to let you know this one right now. Currently, I ran my DraftKings lineups. I actually wasn't even going to play on DK today. My goal was to play on FanDuel, and I sat down about a half hour ago and realized that FanDuel is already filled. So I was not going to be playing on FanDuel. That contest was filled. So now I'm in the fadeaway on DraftKings. And I have Nikola Jokic in every single thing that I built, literally 100%. That will not happen by the time I get to lock. I know that will just come down. But of all the guys that you could have 100% of, no one's ever mad that they have Jokic, particularly against a Brooklyn team that has a mildly limited Nick Claxton, Noah Clowney, who I can confidently say is not going to be providing much resistance to Nikola Jokic. But Trendon Watford's out. Daron Sharp is out. Ben Simmons approximates a big man. He's out. Like, they're missing a lot of size on this team. I feel like Jokic just carves up Brooklyn. So I'm very happy to see that exposure. And then I'm with you on Murray. He's 12% owned. He's in 36% of my stuff. I think he looks like a really good GPP play if he's going to be coming in with that sort of low ownership. Neutral on Porter, basically neutral on Aaron Gordon. And then I sort of mentioned it when I was introing Denver. Christian Brown for 4,400 with shooting guard, small forward eligibility. Assuming he just continues the role of being a starter and playing starter minutes, that's a preposterous price tag for somebody starting, especially with the best positional eligibility that exists. So he's 30% owned. I have 58. He's a guy that I have a lot of trouble getting away from because you just need so little out of him.
Yeah, agree. I think he's mispriced. Like, I think the correct price point for Brown should probably be like low 5K range. So he definitely stands out as one of the better values in the board. So yeah, I have absolutely no issue with going there. Do you have any interest in like anyone off the bench? I know we mentioned Strother. I mean, I think Westbrook's a pretty hard click at 5K. I know he shot really bad. But still don't know if I could do that. And then like, they're just not really playing a ton of guys like Sarge and Watson, not playing as much as I thought. So do you have any interest in anyone on the bench?
I didn't get a single share of a non-starter, including Westbrook. Okay. Westbrook's a tough click. Like, if I got Strother, I wouldn't mind that much. Even Watson, I don't think is crazy on a slate like this. Like, not a guy you're going to be getting a lot of, but I don't mind that just because it is Brooklyn on the opposite side. But yeah, everything that I have is in the starting five. And you mentioned Christian Brown's price. He's $5,500 on FanDuel. He's $1,100 more expensive. The FanDuel price is way more correct than the DraftKings price. And he's still getting 10% ownership on FanDuel, even at 5,500. Speaking of FanDuel, Jokic, like I said, Jokic, Murray, Gordon, all a little over 20% owned. And then Porter is in at 10. I think Porter's probably a little underrepresented on FanDuel. He's a little more pay up there. And I think it's making him a bit more contrarian. But I think it's the same thing on the FanDuel side. It's really the starters and not much else. Like, Westbrook's 4% owned on FanDuel. It's really just Jokic, Murray, Porter, Gordon, Brown, and then kind of ignore the rest of the team for all intents and purposes.
Hey, that's how originally I thought it was pronounced. Was it Brown? Or I was like, wait, it's Christian Brown? That's how you pronounce it?
Well, I mean, any human being reading that is just going to say Braun because that's what it is. But it's annoying. It's annoying. I don't have much else to talk about for Denver. Like, in terms of, there are a couple teams on today's slate: Denver, Minnesota, Sacramento, where it's just like, we know what these guys are doing. They do not really deviate all that much. And Denver's one of them. I don't think there's much to like dig into to Denver. Nobody's out. They run the same rotations all the time. Do you care at all about Michael Porter Jr. running with the second unit? I find that interesting because they're bad, but like, it's also a good spot for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes them look slightly better playing with the second unit. Again, they need shooters out there, obviously, when Westbrook's in the court. So it makes sense why it's happening. So, maybe a slight uptick for MPJ. And he's getting good minutes too, as well. Again, the starters are all just in general getting huge minutes. But like you said, it's just like Denver's a pretty boring team to talk about. We have a few other teams that there's a lot of different ways rotations could go. Denver's not really one of them.
Brooklyn, on the other hand, is at least mildly weird because Ben Simmons is out and Nick Claxton has a mild question mark on him. I'm not saying that he is questionable. I'm saying he has a question mark in that we don't totally know how much he can play because Nick Claxton playing limited minutes is not something that they are anticipating for the entire season. At some point, you expect him to get back up to 30 and just be the starting center. We have 40% ownership coming into Dennis Schroeder, 35 to Cam Johnson, and 20 to Cam Thomas. It's basically the same situation on FanDuel. Those three guys are lapping the field. Although Nick Claxton's also projected for 20% ownership on FanDuel, which feels really high, although he showed up 16% optimal for me. So what do I know? Let's start with the first three. Cam Thomas, Dennis Schroeder, Cam Johnson. These are the guys that are going to play the most for Brooklyn. Do you like them as much as the ownership?
Yeah. I don't really have any super strong takes. Obviously, Schroeder with Ben Simmons out, with Ben Simmons off the court this year, gets a nice assist percentage bump. He's up to like I believe it was 37% assist percentage. He has a pretty secure role with this team right now, playing 30 plus minutes. He's got nice eligibility, so I think he's reasonable. Cam Johnson maybe going a little over-owned at over 30% ownership, but I understand why it's happening. And then Cam Thomas, as you said, a little bit lower than that, around 20%. Has a pretty high ceiling. Obviously, the guy with the highest usage on this team. So I don't really have any issues with these guys getting ownership. I understand why it's happening with Ben Simmons off the court. I think Schroeder's the guy that gets like the biggest bump, I guess.
Yeah. I have 20% of all three of them. So I'm quite a bit under on Schroeder and Cam Johnson, but I don't mind that too much. If they're going to be creeping up over 30, I'm not brokenhearted that I'm not like joining the field. I had them all in and around that 20% optimal mark too. So I'm happy with the way that's working. And for those three guys, Cam Thomas, Dennis Schroeder, Cam Thomas, I don't care if they like when they show up in lineups, cool. I wouldn't even notice. They're just like proper names that can be in lineups and are good plays. The rest of Brooklyn, though. Dorian Finney-Smith, Nick Claxton, Jalen Wilson, Zaire Williams, Noah Clowney, Shake Milton, Keon Johnson. Anything else jumping out to you in that crew of people?
Well, obviously I want to know what the limit is exactly on Claxton, right?
Yeah.
Because he's been on a limit, as you said, the first 3 games so far this season. The minutes have slowly ticked up, 15, then 20, then 22. My guess is he'll still be on a limit, but maybe he plays like a little more, like 24, 25 minutes. If we get the notification that he's no longer on a limit, I think he's probably pushing for 30 minutes. And in that scenario, then I would have a lot more interest. If he's, still on like a low 20s minute limit, I mean, Noah Clowney would get the backup 5 minutes. I guess he would be like an okay punt play. But the issue with Clowney is, as a big man, he's actually not that good of a point per minute player. So, but does have the power forward eligibility. The other guys, I mean, you said there's a little bit of ownership going to Zaire, Dorian Finney-Smith. I think Dorian Finney-Smith is like a reasonable play. Not a high usage player, but I have no issue as a last piece in getting to him. Jalen Wilson, I don't know what to make of the rotation for him. He played like 35 minutes opening night and then was limited to like 15 minutes back-to-back games. So it's pretty hard to trust that right now. And then I do think you'll probably see a little bit of Shake Milton in the rotation, but I don't know if it's necessary to go to him on this slate.
Yeah, I have a couple shares of Claxton, a couple of Wilson, a couple of Zaire Williams, like 4 or 5% of these guys. And that's really it. I wouldn't mind if I had any Dorian Finney-Smith, but that's sort of the same guy. I'm just not all that enamored with like the 5th best guy on the Brooklyn Nets today.
Right. Yeah, they're like basically all those secondary guys are just like filler plays for me.
Yeah. I mean, Cam Thomas is going to shoot 100 times. That dude's going to have some days where it's like, oh, Cam Thomas was 4 of 27 from the field today. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, he's got a pretty low floor, but also high ceiling. That's just kind of Cam Thomas for you.
It would be wild if we still had one of the sites that had negative points for missed field goals like we used to have, because Cam Thomas would be a crazy dude to roster on those sites.
Which site used to do that? I forget.
So Draft Day definitely did. I know there's another one for sure. It could have been Star Street. I don't really remember any longer. Draft Day 100% had it. Where you would, I think it was either -0.5 or -1 for missed field goals.
That's
so like
wild.
the volume
wrinkles
were, yeah,
it was added it.
It was
like
the thing. I mean, I think about it now, like, oh, that was the thing. We didn't know dick about playing DFS back then, and everybody made shitty lineups constantly. So
for sure.
I guess that information would have been more important back then. Oh man. What else we got here? It's all basically the same conversation on FanDuel. Like ownership is sort of mirrored across both sites. Yeah, it's really like focus all of your attention on Cam Thomas, Dennis Schroeder, Cam Johnson. Like that is the focus point for Brooklyn. If there's any takeaway from this, it's that.
Yep, agree with that.
All right, let's put this game to bed. Talk about the schedule quickly for the rest of the day. Very simple. NBA Live before lock is coming up next. You don't even have to leave this stream. 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, all the way up until 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Live before lock. Greg, Eric, breaking it all down. Then we head to playback. Now we are there on playback right now. So if you're on playback, what's up, guys? Go to playback.tv/Stokastic. I believe we're going to be on playback tonight watching, unfortunately, this Denver-Brooklyn game. Dallas, Minnesota is the national TV game, so we won't be able to watch that one with you guys. But everybody can come hang out. If you have League Pass, you can watch Denver and Brooklyn along with us. No lag in chat, so we could just chat it up, talk bets, talk DFS, just watch the game. We got a lot going on. So Greg and I are going to do that for an hour from 7:30 until 8:30. But we're not stopping there either. Aton will be on playback tonight from 8:30 until I don't know when he stops. He's a crazy person, so you could tell me he's on till after the 10 o'clock games, and I'd believe it. So pay attention. Aton coming then, too. So we're doing at least an hour and a half on playback after all is said and done. Lots of content left to go. Dallas Mavericks, Minnesota Timberwolves. Great game. Really wish this wasn't the national TV game. I would give anything to be watching this on playback for an hour. Mavs are 5-point dogs in Minnesota. Not much to worry about in this one. Everybody that's normally available for Dallas is available, except for Maxi Kleba. He was out yesterday. And then for Minnesota, everybody's in. So for Dallas, there's no ownership coming into this team. 9% to Derek Lively is the highest mark on DraftKings. 15 to Kyrie on FanDuel, but everybody else is in single digits. Luka's basically unowned. PJ Washington's basically unowned. Klay Thompson's unowned. Everybody else is unowned outside of basically Lively and Kyrie Irving. How do you want to handle Dallas? Because the matchup is difficult in terms of Minnesota being a good defense. And I think the pricing is just like not that advantageous to Dallas, just given where this ownership is coming in. Are we sleeping on them?
I think some of these guys are going a bit underowned. Yeah. So I guess I'll start with the two centers. Like right now, Lively projecting for the most ownership. I think he's probably the easiest guy to get to on Dallas. Maxi Kleba being out is a slight bump up to the both centers because in the games that Kleba was active, he was actually taking away, he's playing some center minutes, so you weren't getting like the full 48 for Lively and Gafford. You did last game until the blowout, like the last minute or so when they pulled the starter. So especially against Minnesota, I would be very surprised you don't get a full 48 here from Gafford and Lively. So I think both those guys are pretty good contrarian options. There's obviously high opportunity costs. We have some really good centers. We'll talk about, Jokic and Sabonis getting love, but I do think that the Dallas centers are pretty good GPP plays. And then both Luka and Kyrie have interest because of the ownership. Again, I don't love the spot, obviously, but Luka especially had like a really bad game last game. He shot, 5 of 22. I don't think we'd expect that again. So he's getting very little ownership. Kyrie's getting very little ownership, coming in sub 8K with shooting guard eligibility. So I think mainly I'm looking to, as contrarian options, the two guards and then the two centers. I don't have a ton of interest in Klay Thompson. PJ Washington's role, his minutes have ticked up since game one. They kind of took it easy on his minutes, but back-to-back games of 30-plus minutes for PJ. One other thing I wanted to mention is that Jaden Hardy was basically out of the rotation last game. It was Spencer Dinwiddie playing the backup guard minutes. Dinwiddie ended up playing 23 minutes. He's coming in sub 4K. Not something I'm really confident in at all, but did just want to mention that. And then I'm kind of surprised that Quentin Grimes doesn't have a bigger role for this team. He's been like barely playing. So I just wanted to mention that kind of surprises me that he has not played more minutes for Dallas.
I got a lot of surprises for this Dallas team and the things that they're doing, but we'll see what they end up doing by the end of the year. Yeah, I'm with you for most of this. I only have Derek Lively and one individual share of Kyrie Irving. I don't have any Luka, which obviously scares the hell out of me. Hard to want to get to him over Nikola Jokic playing the Brooklyn Nets, though. So in a way, I kind of get it. I'm just having a lot of trouble getting to this team. Now, I do think Luka is a bit underrepresented. Like 5% ownership for Luka on a 4-game slate feels oddly low. I wouldn't be surprised to see it just be like naturally higher because his name's Luka Doncic, and a lot of the like single lineup players are just tapping that name when they build their lineup, and it creeps up a little bit. But we're not going to see a lot of ownership here for Dallas. So I'm going to pray that Minnesota is the advantageous spot in this one because I don't expect to have the Mavericks tonight.
Yeah, and like I said, the field's probably not going to get there either. But Luca,
No.
it just like it's kind of crazy on a 4 game slate. Luca projecting for like sub 5%. That just feels low, even though it's not a good spot. It just feels low.
Yeah, I'm with you. It just like when I look at it, it
Mhm.
just doesn't make any sense in my head.
Yeah, I
We'll
get
see
it.
what we end up with. Minnesota is a slightly different story, particularly on FanDuel, where Ant is 45% owned and Dante DiVincenzo is 35% owned. The rest of the ownership on DK sort of matches the FanDuel side. 25 to Edwards, 25 to Randall, 15 to Gobert, 15 to DiVincenzo, 15 to Conley, 10 to Naz Reid, and just 5 to Jaden McDaniels. I've got a really flat amount of everybody from Minnesota. So I'm going to throw this to you. Do you have somebody that stands out?
Um, I don't think there's anyone that stands out, but I think that like all the main rotation players from Minnesota are going under owned. So they've been running a very tight rotation to start the year. They only played 8 guys in the second half last game. Like Joe Ingles has been in the rotation, but he's like barely playing as the ninth guy. Like I think he played like 5 minutes, I want to say. Last game. It was 6. He's played 7 minutes, 5 minutes, and 6 minutes. So they're running an extremely tight rotation. I just think everyone is going a bit underowned. I like Gobert at 7K, just over 10% ownership. I think he's a very safe option, playing good minutes. Julius Randle, sub 20% looks pretty good. Obviously, Anthony Edwards, I have no issue with him either. He's playing massive minutes, averaging like 40 minutes a game. 2 guys off the bench that I have interest in would be DiVincenzo and Naz Reid. Naz Reid is someone that has a pretty high ceiling, only 5.2K. Always like him in tournaments when he's relatively low owned. DiVincenzo, I think, is kind of underperformed so far for the amount of minutes that he's been getting. So still has some interest in him. Mike Conley, even at 4.4, feels a little bit underpriced, even though the role is not as secure for him this year with DiVincenzo off the bench. Not as interested in the guys like McDaniels and NAW, even though they are really cheap. Again, McDaniels really just out there for defensive purposes. NAW, I think there's other value plays in that range that I'd rather get to. But the group of like Naz Reid, Conley, Gobert, DiVincenzo, Randall, and Ant, I think are all going a bit under owned right now.
They're a weird team today because I'm having trouble figuring out which guy I actually like. The guy I have the most of is Conley, and I hate
Okay.
it. I hate it so much because I don't trust this dude right now. But he's 4,400. Like,
Mm-hmm.
uh, so he's in 28% of my stuff. Ant's in 18. Randall's in 16. Reed, DiVincenzo, Gobert, all in 10. Like, I have all of these dudes, but like, I'm just not taking a stand on anyone. I'm like neutral to the field in the aggregate for ownership, but it's all just sort of nothing interesting. I don't know what to do here. I wish I had somebody just overwhelmingly prioritized here, but I think I'm just going to be having like one Minnesota Timberwolf in every lineup that I have.
Okay. Yeah. I might be a little bit higher on them, but yeah, I mean, I just think because of the rotation, the price points are not outrageous either. Like no one's overpriced by any means. So I'm kind of with you though, of like for me, there's no one that really stands out more than the other. But I wouldn't mind getting to a couple T Wolves in my lineup on a 4 game slate where none of them are really getting a ton of love.
Yeah, same. Like if I had an Ant, DiVincenzo, Jaden McDaniels lineup, like I would not be mad about any sort of construction with Minnesota. They're a really interesting team in that I think you can take it a couple different ways, whether it's just like a little bit of filler the way that I have it set up now, or like taking a stand. I like the game. And you expect this one to sort of be like the most competitive game. I don't mean like closest in score, but like this is the one where both teams are going for it in the best way
Mhm.
without any like nonsense coming from Golden State. Anything else we should be touching on here for Minnesota?
Um, no, I don't think so. They're again the relatively straightforward team to talk about, like Denver, right? They're running a tight rotation. We know what's going on, so yeah.
Ooh. Speaking of this Minnesota rotation, Joe Ingles has played 17 minutes this year. No one else has played for Minnesota, ignoring the other 8 like rotation mainstays. They haven't had a single person step on the floor yet for a second. Ingles for 17 minutes, and that's it. Craziness. I mean, obviously they'll be in some sort of blowout eventually, and people will start getting on the floor, but they are not even letting anybody sniff that rotation. They are locked and loaded into like 8.25 players.
Right. Like no one even coming in at like the end of the half for like a defensive possession or anything. They're running it like a playoff rotation almost.
Got to get themselves ready. By the way, I want to put this down right now in a show. I want to get it out of my mouth. I'm going back revisionist history style, regrading the Minnesota New York trade. The Knicks fumbled it in the biggest way possible. I'm out on the Knicks. Town sucks. Minnesota won the trade. I gotta get that out
I
there.
don't have a super strong take on that trade yet, but yeah. So you think Minnesota won the trade?
Do you know how many threes Karl-Anthony Towns has taken in 3 games?
I don't.
Do you have a guess?
I would guess pretty high.
6.
Huh.
If Karl-Anthony Towns is going to take 2 threes a game, that's going to go down as a next level disgusting trade.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. You would think he'd be shooting way more. Like I would have thought like, oh, he's averaging like 8 threes a game or something. 2 threes a game is not what I thought.
Yeah. Like, do I think that creeps up a little bit? Yeah. It was 5.8 last year, 6.2 the year before. They need him to be 2019, 2020. Karl-Anthony Towns took 8.4 threes per 36 minutes. Do that, because if you're going to have Towns and he's not going to shoot threes, guess what? He's not that good, because he's not good enough defensively to get it done. Sorry. Towns rant out. I wanted to get that out of my body because I've been stewing on it all day. Hate it. I hate it so much. One thing I don't hate, Jordan, I don't know if you have this ready for me. I know you have the tip-off promo on the banner. That's not what we're going with today. Tip-off ends today. Do you want to come in for $1 for just today? Sign up. Link in the description. If you're an NFL fan, I got a better one for you. This is the one you want. If you play NFL DFS and you were paying attention this past Sunday, you might have seen a Stokastic logo at the top of the millie, because we had a sub win $1 million this weekend. And to celebrate that, 30% off any NFL package you want, week or month. So you can get 30% off for the rest of this week, cover yourself for Thursday night football, all day Sunday, Sunday night football, Monday night football. You want to get it for a month, you're going to have a never-ending supply of slates over the next 30 days. 30% off. The promo code is MIL. Link in the description. Sign up, guys. I know you guys like the NFL. Most of you probably like it better than the NBA. Come to my side, though. NBA is better. Promo code, though, that'd make me like the NFL a little bit more. The Sacramento Kings, 6.5-point favorites in Utah, 234 total. Biggest total on the slate by a mile. Now, Sacramento, pretty consistent. Lots of ownership. 30% to Domantas Sabonis across both sites. 30 to Keegan Murray on DK, 20 on FanDuel. 30 to De'Aaron Fox on DK, 50 on FanDuel. 10 for DeRozan, 10 for Monk, 10 for Herter. Those guys are 22, 10, and 13 on FanDuel. So lots of ownership going to the big 6. I use that in quotes very liberally for Sacramento. This is not what I was expecting. The Jokic exposure is definitely affecting this. I am way light on Domantas Sabonis, and I do not like it because I like him a lot tonight.
Yeah, that would be scary to be underweight on Sabonis. I think he's a pretty good play here, obviously. 9.3K. You got a really good spot against Utah. Sacramento is another team that has just been playing their starters huge minutes. Now, it is the second night of a back-to-back. Maybe they ease up a little bit. But still, I think that Sabonis is probably the easiest guy to get to. He's getting the most love, but hard not to like him at that price. De'Aaron Fox, Keegan Murray, DeMar DeRozan, they should all play like probably high 30s minutes. Murray coming in sub 6K. Sands has a really good play there in the mid-range. De'Aaron Fox, only 8.5K, like the upside there. So I really have no issue with any of their top four guys. Sabonis, Fox, Murray, DeRozan, all getting some ownership. I think they should be. Malik Monk coming in around 10%, I think is a decent contrarian play there in the mid-range. He is a guy that if he is playing well, they can extend him a little bit. We know he does have a pretty high ceiling. You got Kevin Huerter there at 4.2. We did see 30 plus minutes from Kevin Huerter last game. I don't think you can expect that every single game, but it's good to see. Like, he is also one of those players where if he's playing well, they can definitely extend him a bit. So another guy that, like, I think is a reasonable contrarian value play. I don't really think I can get to anyone else. Trey Lyles is cheap, but don't think it's necessary to go to him. Keon Ellis, I don't really know what to do with the rotation. Like, he was in the rotation and then he was out of the rotation and then he was back in. So I don't really know what to make of that. But yeah, I think any of the main guys, Sabonis, Fox, DeRozan, Murray look good. And then I think Monk and Huerter are like reasonable contrarian plays at their respective price points.
This is going to be one I dig into when this show ends because I'm like 100 miles under on Domantas Sabonis. I have 6%. Half the field of Keegan Murray, half the field of De'Aaron Fox, 6% DeRozan, 6% Huerter, 14% Monk. I'm like crazy low on Sacramento to the point where I got to scope it out. But for every lineup that I start losing Jokic, I'm guessing Sabonis is just backfilling right into that spot because those two guys look amazing at center tonight. And I don't really want to just draw a line in the sand and have one and not the other. This is a great spot for Sacramento. Utah's dreadful on both sides of the ball. Their defense is really, really, really bad. I think Sacramento carves these dudes up. One of these guys from one of the main guys from Sacramento is going to go bonkers tonight. And you're going to need him because Utah can't stop everybody.
Yeah, I think that assuming no blowout, you're probably going to get one of the main Kings in the winning lineup tonight.
Sorry, I had to screw around there with my camera.
They're good.
Let's see. I'm really curious about like closing lineups for Sacramento. We had a conversation internally a little bit earlier today. I think this is going to be a very different Malik Monk experience for this year in comparison to what we've seen before. Because the talking point was always like, okay, it's Malik Monk, can close from time to time. When he's hot, they're just going to keep him in. But now when you look at it, it's like, well, they've already got this ISO creator in De'Aaron Fox. They've got DeMar DeRozan, who's like one of the best ISO creators in basketball. Domantas Sabonis is fantastic in isolation. Adding Malik Monk to a closing lineup doesn't really bring a lot more to Sacramento. Like, he's just duplicative of the skill set they have for guys that probably aren't coming off the floor. And now I feel like they're way more likely to just be using somebody different in that spot, in that fifth spot. And he doesn't have the same sort of minutes upside that he had previously. Do you have any thoughts there?
No, I think that's a really good point. I didn't really think about that, but I mean, you already have enough offense with this team, right? With Sabonis, Fox, DeRozan, Murray, where like, I don't think, you don't necessarily need Monk in that closing lineup. So that is a really good point. I do think that, maybe the minutes floor this year is a little bit lower than last year. So yeah, I actually agree with that. Now, someone asked me too earlier about like playing Monk and Huerter together. For me in tournaments, I don't think I would do that. I don't really see the ceiling or both those guys having a ceiling game. It's probably one or the other. Yeah. But what are your thoughts on that? Like, would you play both those guys in one lineup, or would you just like pick one?
I would. I wouldn't build it on purpose like that, but it could very easily end up in my. It's not something that I ever look for any longer with Sims. That was more of a optimizer thing for me. But if I were hand building a lineup, the idea of clicking on Monk and Huerter at the same time just wouldn't make a lot of sense in my head. Even though you can very clearly build Malik Monk, Kevin Huerter lineups that are like positive ROI and playable, they just don't feel good. And I'm fine. But if they don't like. I don't want to build a lineup I also don't like if I'm playing one lineup. So it's pretty easy to avoid something like that. But I'm really curious to see how he gets used down the stretch. I think he's more likely to get traded because he just doesn't fill the need for Sacramento the way that he had previously. And I think that he could probably get a pretty decent return and get them somebody that kind of fits alongside everybody else that they have there. But we'll see. I'm curious about Monk now.
Yeah, I think they could use like a better defender or something, like trade Monk away for a good defender or something like that.
Like a Keon Ellis type. I mean, I assume this guy was playing like 26 minutes a night since the beginning. Everything I've ever heard was like he was in and then now he's just out.
So what are your thoughts on that? Like, he was out of the rotation 2 games ago. Because I don't get it. I think he's good. I think he's a good defender. I think he fits this team well, but I don't understand why he's not playing more.
It makes no sense. Everything I listened to through the summer was just like they're really happy to have Keon Ellis. He fits this starting five like a glove. He can come in, be the defensive guy, doesn't have to take on a bunch of offense, which is great because you have these three guys in the lineup that are offensive forward, with Fox and DeRozan wanting to dominate the ball and Sabonis just sort of being a hub. It made perfect sense to me. I came into this season thinking like Ellis is going to play 24 minutes at a minimum every night. Maybe somebody else closes over him. And we got to the season. I don't know what he did in the offseason, but apparently the Sacramento Kings aren't stoked about it.
Yeah, I don't get it. So that really did surprise me. I agree. I thought he was gonna have a pretty good role for this team, but I guess not.
Yeah, I don't. It's weird. Speaking of teams that are weird, you know who we're not rostering today? Taylor Hendricks.
Oof. Brutal. Did you see it?
I did. I've never understood an injury less in my life. I've never seen anybody crumble into pieces without anybody around him. He was like, I assumed he was jumping or, like something happened. And then I saw it. I was like, oh, he wasn't doing anything.
Yeah, it was a freak injury.
His leg gave up on him.
Yep. I have no idea how it happened. None.
I feel so bad for him. That sucks.
I know. I agree.
Ooh, I could read a little fun stat for this quickly. Let me find it here. Where is all of my email? Archive. Got it. Okay, so number 9 pick last year for Hendricks. There's a list of X amount of people that have been drafted in the top 10 who have missed at least 75 games in one of their first 2 seasons due to injury. This is since the merger. Only one guy or Michael Thompson is in 1978. Everything else is 2002 or after. So here's the list of people that have had rough starts to their careers, similarly to Taylor Hendricks. Chet Holmgren missed his entire rookie year, obviously foot injury. James Wiseman, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Dante Exum, Julius Randle, who's probably a decent comp for this one, leg break. Nerlens Noel, 3 Philly guys. Blake Griffin, Greg Oden, Adam Morrison, TJ Ford, and Duke's Jay Williams. So interesting company. Doesn't seem like there are enough names on there where you're like, okay, he can come back and be okay, but I don't know. Interesting company. Found that curious when I read it. So I'm not laughing. I don't feel it's not funny at all. It's the circumstances behind it are funny, but I feel terrible for that dude. That must have hurt like hell. He's ruined the next 6 months of his life are going to be awful. Like everything sucks. I feel so bad for him.
Yeah, I feel awful for him too. I think he's a decent player too. So just freak injury sucks. It does.
Yeah, like he's someone Utah believes in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a real shame for them. Who do you think starts in his stead?
I have no idea. I'm going to be honest. So with Taylor Hendricks out now, I think this could go a lot of different ways. You did see when he got injured, it was in the third quarter. It was actually Kyle Filipowski. They dusted him off and played him a few minutes. I think Utah could trim the rotation down to 9 guys. They've been playing 10 guys. They could trim it down to 9. They could add someone like a Filipowski. I think it goes so many different ways. John Collins has strictly been playing the backup 5 this year. I think he could play some 4. So I don't really have a good read on this situation of who starts. Do you?
I've been going with the assumption that it's going to be Cody Williams.
Okay.
I think there's a small percentage chance that it could be Bryce Sensabaugh. I don't think it's going to be John Collins. It could be. Here's a note for everybody. In games last year where Lauri Markkanen played, which I think is a big piece of this, and John Collins and Walker Kessler were both on the floor. They played 190 minutes in that scenario. They were minus 74. So they're awful when it's Kessler alongside Collins. I'm expecting them to just play Markkanen exclusively at the 4, fill those other, 13 to 15 minutes with whatever you want to be the power forward. I think they'll probably play Collins and Kessler alongside each other for like 3 or 4 minutes. I
Mhm.
don't think that I'm not expecting him to start at the 4. And if that, because it just doesn't work. And I think they saw that last year and they're too smart for that to keep running it out, I think. So I'm going with the leading assumption that it's Cody Williams.
Yeah, I think that's probably the favorite, either him or Sensabaugh, but slim chance could be Collins.
Yeah.
Again, I think Filipowski. I don't think they would start Filipowski, but I think he could like maybe play a little bit. But yeah, because Utah does like running a pretty deep rotation.
And they like their little combos, but I think they might just be at like, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they were real dumb and went, because like you can kind of get away with it against Sacramento, but like they could go George, Sexton, Clarkson. I don't think they're doing that. But if they
Mhm.
went George, Sexton, Clarkson, Markkanen, Kessler, like that would not surprise me at all.
No, I think it's in the range of outcomes. And that's a good. I'm glad you brought that up because in the preseason and then in the first couple of games in the regular season, you were getting like no overlap at all for Sexton and Jordan Clarkson. But you did see it last game once Hendricks went down. You saw 27 minutes for Clarkson and 28 minutes for Sexton. So it also does, I think, the Hendricks injury benefit the guards a bit too. So I think they're just going to play a little bit more alongside each other.
Agreed. So the question then for me is, what do you like here?
Yeah. So taking a look at ownership, not a lot of guys getting love. Lord Marketing getting the most ownership. I understand why, right? He's coming in at a reasonable price point at 8K. No issue with that. Collins and Kessler, the next guy, is getting some love. The downside here, obviously, is they are only center eligible, and so there's high opportunity cost. But I think both are decent plays as well. Like I said, I do think that you can see some John Collins alongside Kessler tonight. I don't think it's going to be for like a long time, but
Yeah.
I think it does boost the appeal a little bit of both those guys. I think the guards are kind of interesting here. They're all coming in sub 10% with Keontae George, with Colin Sexton, with Jordan Clarkson. As we just mentioned, right, you did see a bit more overlap there with Sexton and Clarkson. Keontae George has been consistently playing 30 plus minutes. He hasn't really shot the ball well, right? 3 of 18, 4 of 12, and 6 of 18, but the volume and minutes are still there. And what happens when he has a decent shooting game, right? He's already getting some of the peripheral stats. So I would say I'm a bit higher on these guards in the field is with Sexton, Clarkson, and Keontae George. And then keep an eye on the starting lineup, right? Whoever, if like Williams starts or Sensabaugh starts, they're viable, but those guys, not great point per minute. I think there's going to be better value probably, but whoever starts there, I guess, would be playable as well.
Well, I have 0 George, 0 Sexton, 0 Clarkson. So
Okay.
that's a fun start to this conversation. The only guy that I really got to was Walker Kessler. 5,700, 15% owned. I got 28%. I think he's in line to play like a minute or two more than he normally does, especially if they're going to be going to a little bit of John Collins at the 4, if they have to, which we will see. I gave them 5 minutes alongside of each other, which I think is probably like the upper bound here, unless he starts. Obviously, they're going to play a lot more than that, and all of these projections will change. Got to be ready for late swaps for this one. Luckily for us, Golden State should be making up a boatload of exposure, so being able to swap in that 7:30 to 9 o'clock window should be pretty easy to do, all things considered. Minnesota will block you a little bit, but nothing too crazy. I've got some Markkanen. I've got a couple shares of John Collins, but I'm oddly underrepresented to Utah. I thought I would end up with a bunch. I actually thought I would end up with Cody Williams, $3,700 small forward, but he's really not projecting as a good per minute dude. I kind of want Bryce Sensabaugh to start just because he's a better per minute guy than Cody Williams, and I might actually be able to get to him. But I think the only way that I'm going to get to the fifth starter for Utah today is either if it's John Collins or they go to that 3 guard lineup and I can give those guys a minute, an extra minute or two because they're clearly showing a different rotation. It's a weird team right now, man.
Yeah, they're kind of weird to talk about just with the rotation that they run. But I do agree. Like if you do get that, if you get the chance where John Collins does start at the 4, then I would say he would be my favorite play in Utah. Still sucks he's only center eligible, but I think that would make him look a lot better.
Like I would not be surprised if they went like 34. I'm just gonna say 34 minutes to Markkanen, 14 to Filipowski as the backup power forward, and they just wash their hands of it because they don't really have enough else. And we'll see. What are your thoughts on Kyle Filipowski?
I mean, I don't think he's a great NBA player. I don't think he's really gonna make the rotation for Utah when they're fully healthy. So yeah.
Thoughts on his girlfriend?
Oh, that story, yeah. Can you remind me again? It's his girlfriend basically said that like he can't talk to his family anymore, right? Something like that.
Yeah, more or less. His girlfriend's like 28 or something.
Oh,
And
she was his babysitter, right?
yeah,
I think.
he was in high school when they started dating,
Yeah.
and then he does not speak to his family, I guess, anymore, which can only mean one thing. She must be in the sack, man. Because if you're willing to give up your entire family for it, I don't know what that gal's got going on, but they should probably research it and bottle it and sell it because she just changed that dude's entire life with it. Maybe that's what happens when she grabs him at 17 or whatever, and you have no idea what's going on with some older gal. But yeah, yeah, it's a wild story.
It is. I want to do some more digging on that after this. I forgot about that. I remember I saw something about that on Twitter. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And then I never really looked into it anymore. But yeah, the age gap, the fact that she was his babysitter, he was in high school and they started dating, like it's all pretty crazy.
So nuts. One thing I do want to say, Kyle, you should not have cut your family out for it, but at the same time, that must have been a pretty good run while you were in high school. Your buddies must have been like, dude, is that what happens when you're good at basketball? Good for him, man. Good for him. I don't have anything else here for Utah. The takeaway here for the Jazz is very simple. Pay very close attention at 8:30 p.m. when that lineup gets announced and be ready to swap because there is nothing more valuable than a swap. And if this breaks in a way that we didn't know, it'll be the most valuable thing you could do on today's slate. Ready to close this one out?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. First one's pretty easy. New Orleans Pelicans, -1.5 in Golden State, 217 total, lowest total on the slate. Not a ton of ownership coming into the Pels. On FanDuel, everybody's sort of in the 15 to 25% range. That's McCollum, Ingram, Jones, Zion. It's a lot lower on DK. CJ's 20, Zion's 20, but Brandon Ingram's 6, Herb Jones is 2. There's not much ownership here coming into the New Orleans Pelicans. So how do you feel about the guys that matter?
Yeah, so one thing to note, I want to keep an eye on the news for Zion. First couple games, they said he was on a limit. Now, last game, he only played 28 minutes, but he was definitely on pace for 30 plus if the game did not blow out. So just keep an eye on that. I do think that he's close to just being full go. But yeah, I think like any of Zion, Ingram, and CJ are reasonable options. None of them getting insane ownership. I'm not going to prioritize any of them, but they're all like viable. Jordan Hawkins has a big role for this team right now. He's been the six man. He's playing 30 plus minutes a night. Sub 5K. I think he's again like an interesting contrarian play, but I think there's other guys in that range that probably look a little bit better. I don't think I can get to Herb Jones. The center rotation is pretty gross right now. And there's other centers that I would just rather take shots on. Like I would rather take a shot either the Dallas centers than these New Orleans centers. So I'll pass them like Tyson and Messi. I don't think it's necessary to get to Javonte Green, even though I think he will be in the rotation. So I think mainly
Strother for today, I guess. Javonte Green.
Sorry, what did you say?
Sort of a Javonte Green is sort of like the Pelicans Julian Strother today.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But yeah, I think Zion, Ingram, CJ, and then Hawkins would be the guys in consideration for me, but none of them are priorities.
I don't have any Brandon Ingram. I don't have any Herb Jones. I have one lineup with CJ McCollum, which it will be a digging in point after this show. And I have 12% of Zion. And I don't have anybody off the... if I was going to get anybody, it would be Jordan Hawkins. I don't have anybody else, though, for the Pels. Tough team to get to. They look a lot better on FanDuel. Like Brandon Ingram's a couple hundred cheaper. Herb Jones is $500 cheaper. You roster people differently, so like CJ looks more interesting there. Just doesn't look all that good. And I'm a believer in this Golden State defense for today. I think that's sort of what people are like going to mentally sleep on in this one. I like Golden State. Like I bet Golden State. Because you see offense in your mind. So everybody immediately thinks like, oh, CJ, Brandon Ingram, Zion, all these good players. And then you look at Golden State and it's like, well, no, Steph, all these guys are random. They're all pretty good defensively. And you don't think about it like that, but I think they make back a lot of what they're giving up on offense by not being awful defensively. But no Steph, in case I buried the lead there. Maybe just make sure I get it all right. No DeAnthony Melton. Brandon Pajemski is available. And Andrew Wiggins is out. So we're missing 3 dudes from the Warriors. I have no idea how many dudes they're going to play today. Somewhere between from 9 to 12 for sure. 25% ownership to Kuminga, 35 to Pajemski, 30 to Buddy Hield, 10 to Draymond, 50 to Moses Moody, 10 to Trace Jackson Davis, scattered amounts to Kyle Anderson, Gary Payton, Kevon Looney. A little bit different on FanDuel. Trace Jackson Davis is 40 there. Moses Moody is only 25 there. He's $800 more expensive. And then Kuminga, Pajemski, Hield, and Green are all about 15. What guy do you like the most from the Warriors?
Well, okay, so I wanted to start with this. Obviously, I think Golden State is the best team to target on the slate. It is interesting, though, that the Pels are only 1.5 point favorites. You know, you said you bet Golden State because I looked at that line. I was like, I think New Orleans. I thought they would have been bigger favorites, but I get your point for sure. They're still solid defensively, and they're deep, right? They're a deep team, so they're still good. And then the other question I had is, I don't know who starts for this team. I think that Pojemski is going to start at the point, and then I don't really know who's going to start for Wiggins. I think it could be a lot of different guys. Do you have a strong lean, or like what's your guess? I guess for the Golden State starting lineup.
Right now, my assumption is Pajemski, Hield, Kuminga, Green, Trace Jackson Davis. I have zero confidence in the words that just came out of my mouth. They don't really have a point guard anywhere to be found for this team. So I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to use Kyle Anderson more as someone to initiate offense. Moses Moody's pulling all of this ownership. I think a lot of that is 3,600. He's not a point guard. He is not like a guy that's going to be running the show for Golden State today. In theory, he could start in that Buddy Hield spot, but then there's zero spacing anywhere. If they're going to start Trace Jackson Davis and Draymond, then I think you kind of have to have Buddy Hield out there to just continue some spacing. I'm confident in one thing. Kerr's going to make a shit ton of substitutions, and we're going to never have it. The same 5 guys are just never going to be on the floor. He's constantly going to be moving these guys in and out. But right now, for me, it's Pajemski, Hield, Kuminga, Draymond, Trace Jackson Davis. What do you think?
I think it's either Hield or Moody. I think that makes the most sense. But yeah, so my guess for this rotation too, they were playing a 12-man rotation, right? And now you lost 3 guys. I think they're going to play 10 guys tonight. I think that Lindy Waters gets dusted off and plays a bit. I would be pretty surprised if they go beyond that, but I guess it's Steve Kerr. You never know. But yeah, I mean, this team, again, with those 3 guys out, you're going to want some exposure. I think that factoring in ownership right now, Pajemski would probably be my preferred option. Coming in sub 5K, expecting him to start. He's a guy that can kind of stuff a stat sheet. So I think he looks really good. Kuminga I'm surprised on the minutes for Kuminga. I mean, I guess they've been running a 12-man rotation, but I thought he would have a much bigger role for this team. He's only averaging about 20 minutes a game. What did you say?
I said, so did he.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so I think that right now, Pojemski and Kuminga would be my 2 preferred options. Keep an eye on who starts for Wiggins. Again, I think it's either Hield or Moody. Either way, both look good in my opinion. Buddy Hield's been chucking. He's got shooting guard, small forward eligibility. Moses Moody is really cheap. Maybe going a little bit over-owned right now at about 60%, but still like him for value. So I think Kuminga, Pajemski, my 2 preferred options, and then Hield and Moody be the next guys I look to. But I also kind of like slow-mo Kyle Anderson. He's not getting much love at all. I think he could definitely play like 20 minutes tonight. So have some interest in slow-mo. The bigs with like Jackson Davis, Draymond, and Looney all going pretty low owned. I think they're reasonable plays as well. But yeah, I think the preferred options for me right now would be Podziemski, Kuminga, and then Moody, Healed. If you want a lower owned guy, I think for me it would be a Slow-Mo.
Let me do one thing quickly. I gotta hit chat. Okay. I have 90% of Moody right now, which I will work back a little bit. And depending on the starting lineup, this is going to wiggle too. But just him being 3,600 and a like 0.95 fantasy point per minute guy, he's just going to look good on a 4-game slate. The guys of the guys that you like to get to, I've got 58% of Kuminga, so I'm 2xing the field. He's going to take whatever shot he wants because they don't have other people that can do that. Podziemski's in 40% of my stuff. Buddy Hield's in 30% of my stuff. I have 9 Warriors in at least one lineup. I've got a very tiny amount of Draymond Green. I've got 10% of Trace Jackson Davis, 1 share of Kyle Anderson, which I'm going to make sure is slightly more than that by the time I get to lock. I have 8% of Gary Payton, which I don't really trust in any way, but he's available. And I actually have 14% of Kevon Looney right now. So I'm going to need the Adam share run out with Kevon Looney, who got bailed out and ended up getting into second because Looney decided he wanted to go as Angel Reese for Halloween and just get like 10 straight offensive rebound putbacks. Ran at him all the way to second place. So I'm going to try to do that as well. I have a little bit of Kuminga, or I have a little bit of Looney, but yeah, I have 9 guys from Golden State. And I want that. I want to have as much ownership to these guys as I possibly can, at least until 9 o'clock, so I can make some moves once those 7:30 games lock, because there's going to be something that pops up, whether it's Utah or Golden State, that I think we weren't probably expecting. One of those, like if either one of those teams make like a weird rotation decision, we want to be ready to swap. So I'm happy to be very heavily exposed to Golden State. But I think ignoring the value of Moody, I want Kuminga.
Yeah. I think Kuminga should lead this team in usage. He should get a lot of shots up. I think that minutes wise, he probably, pushes for 30 minutes, low 30s or so. So, yeah, I think like of anyone on this team, he definitely has the highest ceiling. Like I said, I'm just surprised that he's not played more for this team. So, 5.9K. Yeah. Love the upside on him.
Me too. 6,700 on FanDuel, a lot harder to get to, but that price tag on DraftKings is a price tag that Jonathan Kuminga would have if Steph Curry were playing.
Yep.
4 games up, 4 games down. We have reached the end of the line. Fun slate. We got an hour to go, but NBA Live Before Lock is coming up next. Before we get to it, guys, hit the like button if you can. We have 2,600 people in. I wasn't paying attention. This is on me. Totally on me. Didn't ask again, and I made the mistake. There's 2,600 people in here and 250 likes. I want to give the Live Before Lock guys a bit of a present. Let's see how high we could run that number. 400 should happen like this. There's too many of you here that haven't hit the thumbs up yet. We're talking like 2,300 people. We need like 150 plus of you guys to hit that thumbs up. Give a little bit of a nod to the Live Before Lock guys. Let them know they feel loved when they get here. DK, tell the people how they can find you.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter. That's going to be DK__DFS. You can also find content on YouTube for me. That's DK DFS, doing some DFS and prop content on both of those.
There it is, everybody. NBA Live Before Lock coming up next. And to all of you that have been hitting the like button since I asked, thank you very much. Well north of 400 at this point. Show those guys 500. We're out of here. Peace.
with whatever that leg looked like. I mean, Taylor Hendricks is dead. Yeah. Which would you rather have?
I don't know, that would require a lot of thinking for me to really figure out. Maybe it'll be something that Josh and I will dive into on playback. We're watching the shows after this. But hey guys, what's happening? Hope you all had a good weekend. Yesterday, I wasn't on the NBA show. I was doing the NFL show, filling in for Lofty, so we shuffled some up a bit. So I missed out on talking to my friend Eric Lindquist here, which I don't know if you saw. I mentioned you in a tweet a little before the show started, but there was an award given out for like sexiest podcast co-host, and we were not nominated somehow. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, that sucks. I was at lunch with Jordan Franks, so shout out to one of the OGs here behind the glass here at Stokastic. Met up with him, got some lunch, chatted with him before he goes to a concert tonight, and had a lovely little time. But didn't get an opportunity to really see this tweet of yours, so I'm trying to pull it up here. That's absolute bullshit. The Kelsey brothers. I mean, fuck Travis Kelsey at this point.
But it's that kind of
Jason Kelsey's still awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to figure out how to get involved in this. But yeah, the Kelsey brothers have been named People's Sexiest Podcast Hosts of 2024. Complete bullshit that nobody. Right. I don't even know what other people were nominated for this, but Eric and I were not up for consideration. It is an outrage. The people are up in arms in Twitter. You could tell because I sent a message about it and got 3 likes on it. So people are very upset about this.
Retweeted
on social media, and hopefully it will be rectified for next year.
It's absurd. I mean, look at that face. Greg Ehrenberg looks like Casper the Friendly Ghost as a human. How could you not love that?
Exactly. I'm somebody who, to preserve my youthfulness, I've punted on going outside for 30 plus years now. And what has it done for me? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Say it again. But once again, Twitter's up in arms about it. So I have a feeling good things are coming our way for next year. But before we get there, we got this show to do. 4-game NBA slate. So guys, do us a favor. Like the video. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Usually when I'm hosting live before lock, I'll pick between playing on DraftKings or FanDuel. It's kind of hard to manage both sometimes. But for today, with it only being a 4-game slate, I'm playing 150 lineups on both sites, going all out. Pretty excited for it. I like both the sites. I like some of the differentiation between the two. And also, if you guys have not signed up for our Tip-Off 24 promo, I know a lot of you have probably taken advantage of it, but this is the last call for it. It is ending today. So if you want to sign up, you're only going to get one slate out of it, but it's better than none, and it's only $1. So sign up using the link below in the promo code TIPOFF24, $1. Get access to our player projections, ownership projections, our sims, our single lineup sims, the late swap tool, which could come in handy because who knows what the hell the Warriors are going to end up doing with their starting lineup later. It's something that Eric and I are going to be discussing in just moments here. So if you haven't taken advantage of that promo and you want to try out our tools, just $1, link below down in the YouTube description box. Eric, what is most important to you on this slate? It's a 4-gamer, but there are injury news and value to be had for a 4-game slate.
The Warriors. They're 4 of the 5 most popular plays, I believe, on both sites. So we're going to go with the Warriors.
Do you have a strong expectation for the starting lineup, or are you unsure, or maybe just the best guess? Where are you at with your confidence level on who the starting 5 is going to be for Golden State?
All right, there are 3 iterations of it, and I've literally purposely carved this out as 65, 25, and 10. Okay, so we did 65, 25, and 10. Yeah, no, that is exactly the way it is. All right. I am 65% positive that the starting lineup will end up being Brandon Pajemski, Buddy Hield, Jonathan Kuminga, Draymond Green, Trayce Jackson-Davis. I am 25% sure that the starting lineup will be Brandon Pajemski, Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, Draymond Green, Trayce Jackson-Davis. I am 10% sure that the lineup is Brandon Pajemski, Gary Payton II, Jonathan Kuminga, Draymond Green, Trayce Jackson-Davis. I think that's the right confidence intervals for these. I think Buddy Hield is the chalk to start, but I still think Moses Moody is a guy who I want to have in a large portion of my lineups. He can get it done in a quick fashion. Obviously, we don't have the risk of somebody sharing the floor with Steph Curry, which is like a 35% usage hog in all of those situations. And last year without Clay, without Steph on the floor, Jonathan Kuminga was kind of the de facto guy. Now, Buddy Hield, he's going to be out there to pull the trigger whenever possible. I think he is the chalk to start, but I still like the idea of getting to a little bit more Moses Moody, not just because of the price point, but because I don't think that they're going to be sold to any kind of a closing lineup. And I think that that's like the most important part to talk about, is that whoever is the hot shooter there is going to be the one who's closing between Buddy Hield and Moses Moody. But then there's that 10% chance, because Steve Kerr is Steve Kerr, that Gary Payton is out there and he's causing havoc for CJ McCollum, for Brandon Ingram, for doing, the nitty gritty stuff. And Brandon Bajemski maybe is knocking down shots. So Jonathan Kuminga might be, scoring 25, 30 points at the moment. And they close with Gary Payton. So I think those are the three most likely iterations of that starting lineup. How do you break it down?
Yeah, so here's what we could be the most confident. Kuminga, Green, Trace Jackson Davis, those three are starting. Then the real question, who's starting in place of Steph Curry and who's starting in place of Andrew Wiggins, who's out dealing with, I believe it's a back injury. And I think the point guard is going to be Brandon Pajemski. I feel pretty good about that. The reason I think it's going to be Pajemski is they just need a playmaker out on the court, and there are just not very many of them considering the current makeup of the Warriors. And earlier in the day, Josh and I were on our projections call. We talk with the data team. We go over all the players and everything. We try to figure out what we think the starting lineups could be. We look at some on-off court numbers. And what was really interesting to look at is that Pajemski's assist rate last year, when Steph Curry and Chris Paul were off the court, it was astronomically high. It was a massive bump in assist rate for Pajemski, which leads me to think he's the kind of player that Steve Kerr trusts with the ball in his hands to create offense. And that's why I think he's going to start at point guard. And that's also why I think he's somebody who, while he's going to be fairly popular in DFS, is certainly somebody we want to be rostering. What I'm really not confident in is who starts as the fifth starter. I am very certain in Kuminga, Draymond, and Trace Jackson Davis. I am fairly certain on Pajemski. And then the final starter could go just so many ways. They could go Buddy Hield. They could go Moses Moody to, you mentioned Gary Payton. That's another possibility they could go to, because he's a fantastic defender and he's somebody who Golden State likes. Another thing too is this is a deep team. A lot of these guys are kind of interchangeable, like Buddy Hield, Brandon Pajemski, Gary Payton. A lot of these guys, if you look at the new EPM projections, which are really useful. I'm using them in the model that I have that I use to create spreads for games, and the Darko and all that. Like, all these guys rate out as being like solid players, but not a lot that differentiates them. So another thing that I think is going to happen in this game that you also alluded to, Eric, is just because you have something as the starting lineup, it doesn't mean it's going to be the closing lineup. And whoever is in that closing lineup, I don't think it's predetermined. I think it's going to be based on the flow of the game. And it is very, very difficult to expect anybody on this team to play north of 30 minutes.
This is why, I mean, I don't want to be like too complimentary of you, but like, one of my favorite things about doing shows with you is that you do look at things from all different angles. You take into account what I say sometimes, which, obviously I respect, but I do think that your ability to just kind of look at things from the outside in and kind of come to that same conclusion that I do, where it's like that closing lineup is very much going to be determined by shooting. Like Moses Moody, Buddy Hield. One of the two you want to have on the floor in that closing lineup. I just don't know who it's going to be between the two. And because Moses Moody is where he is for a price point, and I expect people to potentially try to find ways to get him out of lineups if he doesn't start, I really strongly hope Moses Moody doesn't start and that he ends up being the guy who closes. Like, that would make me especially happy on a slate like this. Now, his price point, he's the most popular player on this slate by a landslide. He's still going to be popular, but I'm really hoping he doesn't start to potentially get people to pivot off of him. I don't even know where you necessarily turn that into at 3,600, but we're going to have lots of exposure to this game. Jonathan Kuminga, Brandon Pajemski, I think we both, see the same thing, because you go through some of his rates. You can't really get a sample size with Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Chris Paul, and Andrew Wiggins off the floor from last year. It ends up being like something minuscule. Pajemski, he's not even showing up for me. But there it is, 181 minutes, 23% assist rate. That's not crazy, but you have to remember Chris Paul, he was out for quite a bit of time there. Andrew Wiggins, not going to be somebody who cuts into an assist rate. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, not a noted passer and something that's kind of making my brain hurt looking at some of his assist rate stuff through the first 3 games. And then Steph Curry, that's the big one there for me. How do you think, though, that they're going to do like some of the minutes for the other pieces? Because like I'm having a tough time with Lindy Waters, Kyle Anderson, Kevon Looney. Like where are you allocating these other minutes? I don't even have Santos in this rotation right now. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's still a 10-man rotation here for Golden State.
Yeah, and then you've also got Reese Beekman, who could potentially end up playing today. He's currently in the G League, and it's undetermined if he's going to be getting called up for this game or not. But really spread out. I don't have any player projected to play more than 30 minutes on the entire team. I've got the closest, Jonathan Kuminga, at 29 minutes, and then just really spread out past there. And that's when you start to get guys like Kyle Anderson, Gary Payton, Kevon Looney. All these guys, I think, should be expected to play around 20 minutes. And then depending what happens with Buddy Hield and Moses Moody potentially for that last spot, I still wouldn't put any of them above 30 minutes, but I certainly would go for like upper 20s minutes for Buddy Hield or Moses Moody if they were starting. But here's where I think is going to be most important to people to kind of put a bow on some of our Golden State Warriors talk is let's do it for both DraftKings and FanDuel. Is what are your tiers of exposures to get to the players? And we'll start with DraftKings, and you can do your tier 1, then I'll do my tier 1, and I'll read some of the questions that you guys have as well. But do you have any one player on the Warriors starting on DraftKings, Eric, that you have more exposure to than all of the other players, or maybe multiple of them?
I have nearly 100% Moses Moody and nearly 80% Brandon Pajemski.
Okay, yeah. So for me, tier 1 is Moses Moody, and a big part of it is even though we're kind of uncertain on the minutes, he just exists in a price range by himself. Like you said before, it's if he's out, who do you swap to? There isn't a 1-for-1 swap, but what you had said, which I think is very important here, and it's why also we're going to get this question because I know we always get it, is what kind of ROI upgrades or downgrade boost are we making to players in the Sims before lock? As of right now, none, because my lineups are just naturally backloaded because of the amount of Warriors I get to. So it's really a scenario where right now my most rostered player on the entire slate on DraftKings is Moses Moody. He's just a value play that is kind of incomparable in terms of other points per dollar plays at $3,600. But if he doesn't end up starting and maybe they go Buddy Hield or something like that, cool. I'll just update my lineups, run through the late swap tool, and that's just going to naturally get me to less of Moses Moody, and it'll be easy to make those adjustments because of how much exposure I have to the game. But anyway, tier 1 for me is Moses Moody. It seems like you have Pajemski in that tier as well, but next grouping of players from the Warriors that you're getting a lot of exposure to.
Yeah, I would put Brandon Pajemski as the 1B because, again, nearly 80% of my lineups, 77% of my lineups on DraftKings. FanDuel, I'm going to rerun some stuff. I'm actually playing a little bit more over on FanDuel, but running a little bit slower, getting everything done over there. Tier 2 for me is Kuminga and Buddy Hield.
Yeah, so for me, tier 2, I've got a Moody in a tier by himself, and then Buddy Hield is also in a tier by himself right now. Buddy Hield is somebody who, to me, whether he starts or comes off the bench actually doesn't really impact Buddy Hield all that much for me, just because I think his upside is very dependent on making shots, and how much he plays is going to depend on making shots. So whether he starts or comes off the bench, if he makes his shots, I think he's going to have a big fantasy game. If he doesn't, then I think he ends up playing like 22, 24 minutes and ends up being a bust for the slate. So I like the upside for him for tournaments, but tier 1 for me, Moses Moody. Tier 2 is Buddy Hield. Then my tier 3, it's a bunch of guys grouped together, Eric. That's where I've got Pajemski, Trace Jackson Davis, Jonathan Kuminga. Those guys are all grouped together for me. I don't have any other player from the Warriors showing up in a ton of lineups for me outside of those guys that I've listed. So the tier 3 for me, it's Kuminga, it's Trace Jackson Davis, it's Brandon Pajemski grouped together. How about for yourself?
Yeah, I'm going to also throw Kyle Anderson out there. This is a guy who's been a Swiss Army knife for a lot of teams in the past. I get worried because the first 2 games were complete blowouts. Portland, Utah, nothing remotely close, 15, 19 minutes. He only plays 4 minutes there against the Clippers, but with no Wiggins, there's a lot of constructions where like Kyle Anderson was a point guard back at UCLA once upon a time. With my Timberwolves, there were times he came out and could fill multiple positions on the floor. We saw that in Memphis. We saw that last year with Minnesota. I think we'll see that here with Golden State to some extent. And Steve Kerr, just remember that it's Steve Kerr every single time. Nothing should really surprise you all that much. And so for me, that's kind of my security in Moses Moody is like, even if Moses Moody is for whatever reason limited to 19, 20 minutes, I feel as though I'm still holding hands with like 60% of the field and probably in a good spot because that upside can be so pronounced. You take everybody off the floor. And with Clay, Steph, Chris Paul, Andrew Wiggins, we have 156 minutes with Moses Moody, 27.4% usage over the last calendar year. So for me, that makes me comfortable enough where it's just like, all right, Moody, I feel good about. But from a tournament perspective, I think the price points make it at least appealing to look at Gary Payton, to look at Kyle Anderson, and just like boost them a little bit, get yourself to like double digits of these guys, and like find ways to just intermix them into your lineups. Because if the positionality works out where out of the middle of nowhere, one of the two of them starts, again, Kyle Anderson, I would put at like a 0.1% chance, I suppose, of starting. But like in the event that Steve Kerr does certain things with the rotation that we just don't expect, which is pretty likely, I would say today, I have a price point. I have a lineup configuration that might just look different than everybody else's.
Yeah, I think some of those other guys you mentioned are certainly ones who like I'll be mixing into a low percentage of lineups here and there, but like not anybody who I think anybody needs to be playing if they're playing just, like a couple lineups or something like that. But I
love
do
Looney
for
for tournaments
across
for what it's
150
worth.
lineups. Like I have some Gary Payton, I have some Draymond Green, I have some Kyle Anderson, but and I have some Kevon Looney too, but it's all guys who are like around 10% of lineups. Those other ones are like real core parts of my lineups.
Yeah, so let's do the Looney thing here, because I do think Draymond Green getting later into his basketball career, he said how many times, like him and Anthony Davis, like, oh, we hate playing the five. Draymond Green been specifically saying that I like Trace Jackson Davis out there. I don't want to play the five. And that's something I know a friend who's best friends with an assistant coach at Golden State, for what it's worth. And Draymond Green has been very vocal about how much he hates playing the five in the NBA at this stage of his career, because he's looking for longevity. He's a guy who goes on TNT and does his rants and does whatever else. Like he's somebody who's going to have a long career after basketball, and like, isn't looking to get beat up by 7'1" guys at this stage of his career, getting elbowed in the face, such and so on and so forth. But for what it's worth, I think that one of my favorite tournament plays on today's slate is Kevon Looney. We saw two complete blowouts where he played 14 and 13 minutes against Portland and Utah. None of those were remotely close. Didn't need to push his minutes. You got to a true center on the other side here with the Clippers, and you saw 20 minutes for Kevon Looney. This has always been a guy who could rebound the basketball. He averages 9 rebounds per game in like 15 and a half minutes per game right now. His chances of a double-double today are pretty interesting, and we're still waiting for a ton of props to drop. I'm still waiting to update some of this in my sheet because they just don't want to throw stuff out with Moody and Podziemski. We saw a 4-assist prop for like 2 seconds on Underdog, and then they ripped that off the board. But like, I've been hawking this all day, and I'm really looking forward to playing more of these Golden State bench guys than just about anybody else on the slate.
All right, so we did the tiers rankings of the word. By the way, people in chat were confused by my mentioning of the word tiers. It's not tiers, the format that doesn't exist anymore. We're talking about just tiers in terms of order of priorities for our favorite Warriors players over on DraftKings. Over for FanDuel, same exercise where the pricing is way different. Like Moses Moody looks way different on FanDuel at his price point than he does on DraftKings, because there's a big difference between 3,600 and 4,400. So on FanDuel, my favorite overall player from the Warriors and the one I get the most of, it is actually Trace Jackson Davis over on FanDuel, where I think that, well, there's a couple things in his favor. First off, he's a little bit lower owned over on FanDuel. That's something that plays in his favor. But then another part of this too, he's got the power forward center eligibility. Power forward isn't all that strong on FanDuel. We have to roster 2 of them. But also I think the FanDuel scoring is a little bit more favorable for Trace Jackson Davis and his ability to rack up blocks when he's getting extended time on the court. And we've seen the Warriors get away from Trace Jackson Davis in some of these games, but if this is a game where he starts off playing well, I think he's going to earn himself potential more playing time. So there's an upside there. So Trace Jackson Davis with the power forward and center eligibility, he's the Warrior I get the most of on FanDuel, Eric.
Has everything to do with power forward for me. Yeah, I'm playing 35 lineups over on FanDuel in that main contest, and I currently have Trace Jackson Davis in the most lineups, Moses Moody not far behind. I'm overweight to both of them at their current ownerships. I think the biggest talking point for me is what you do with Podziemski over on FanDuel. He's 5,700, and we have a pretty noticeable difference in our projections as far as where his ownership's sitting at, 16, 17%, and his optimal percentage. He's optimal nearly a quarter of the time. And one thing I do want to do more in my NBA process is like getting allocations to players and like really widening my net when there's a discrepancy between DraftKings and FanDuel pricing. Podziemski is obviously a better play just relative to salary over on DK, 4,900, fits point guard, shooting guard, only 8 roster spots. But At 5,700, this is a guy I still kind of want to really fire hard because he's got such a discrepancy on a 4-game slate to have like a 7-8% difference between ownership and optimal percentage in the boom bust. Like, this is something that you don't see very often. And as I carry it over to the Sims, it's starting to happen a little bit, but I think I might force a little bit more of him, even though he's not really popping at the moment.
Yeah, so number one for me, it's Trace Jackson Davis. Then the next grouping of players over on FanDuel, Moses Moody falls into that, as does Buddy Hield, and there's a little bit of a drop off. So tier one for me, as far as my exposure goes, Trace Jackson Davis. Then I've got Buddy Hield and Moses Moody. So Trace Jackson Davis in over half of my lineups. Then I've got Buddy Hield as well as Moses Moody, each around in 40% of my lineups is the next tier. So who do you go for your next grouping of players on FanDuel?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the same. I would actually be putting Moses Moody into like the 1B category just behind Trace Jackson Davis. 4,400 is still too cheap for him. And you look at shooting guard today, you got Dante DiVincenzo, you have Anthony Edwards, you have some guys that aren't exactly great salary savers on FanDuel that are pretty shooting dependent. So like one of my favorite things to do on FanDuel is when you see a shooting guard that ends up being shooting dependent, and then you can get a guy like Pajemski into lineups at 15-16%, I usually end up jamming them a little bit more because of what they can add in terms of other parts of the box score. And, you know, I think it's pretty likely that you have either Anthony Edwards or Dante DiVincenzo have a, you know, a mediocre or neutral to poor shooting night amongst the two of them. And I think that that's where I really want to kind of force in. I would say tier 2 for me, Buddy Hield. Point guard, shooting guard's kind of weird eligibility for him. I thought you'd get shooting guard, small forward, but he's probably alone in tier 2. And then I'd probably go into tier 3 with everybody else. Kuminga, Pajemski, but I am very inclined to be overweight on these guys as well.
Yeah, and then some of these players too, just more aggressively priced up on FanDuel. Like Kuminga's $6,700 with power forward and small forward eligibility. Playable, but like I have a little bit under 20% of Jonathan Kuminga, whereas I get to more of them over on DraftKings. So I see it the same way as you. The rest of the guys just kind of grouped together. But now I've got a bunch of questions that have started to pile up. We spent a lot of time talking about the Warriors. That's because to me, it is the most important part on the slate. But let's see what else you guys have as far as your questions are concerned here. First, Riley Shaffrey says, the Sims are worth it. And then he gives us a little bit of a winking smiley face there. And yeah, also, you know who probably agrees with that? Bunt Cakes. Did you see, Eric? We had somebody win $1 million using our Sims tools on Sunday.
You know, I did see that. It was absolutely fantastic.
So because we had somebody who won $1 million who's a sub to the site and used the tools, we do have this NBA deal ending tonight, but we're also starting an NFL one. So because Rick 12324, aka Bunt Cakes over on Twitter, ended up winning $1 million this weekend, we want to celebrate it. So if you guys are looking to sign up for any of our NFL packages, any of them, any NFL package at all, you get 30% off when you sign up with the promo code MILL, M-I-L-L. You can either go and type that in, or even easier, there's a link down below in the YouTube description box. If you guys are looking to play NFL DFS and get access to all of the tools we have for NFL, sign up with that promo code MILL and get yourself 30% off any NFL DFS package of your choosing. So yeah, I agree, Riley. I think the Sims are certainly worth it. And Rick is probably going to agree with it as well because he's $1 million richer this week. Chris Williams says it worked for me last night in NFL and then he says, Sotex and him are having the best nights of our season. So we have to do it tonight in the NBA. And then he tells everybody to like the video because that is what is going to bring yourselves good karma. Yeah, I agree, Chris. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. And then Chris also gifted out 5 YouTube memberships, as did Sotex. So both of you guys, thank you very much for supporting the channel. And then Chris says, take that back. All right, he's taking it back. He says his best night was in NFL, and then Sotex's best night was in NBA. And then he clarifies once again that either way, liking the video, subscribing to the channel is going to bring you karma. So once again, thank you, Chris. Then Grabaka Mex says, why have Eric on shows if he can't deliver the sexiest podcaster award? Well, here's the good thing is because it keeps him working because he has something to strive for. We don't want Eric's head to get too big.
Hello.
There
you have me on shows because I'm so sharp. I make lots of money on NFL picks, contrary to fucking whatever his fucking face just said. Derek Palmer, hello. How are you?
All right. Well, there we have it. Yeah, I can't imagine why Eric didn't help win us that award.
How'd I not win? I'm so beautiful.
Are your teeth dry?
No, they're feeling great.
All right. Sotex says he came in second on Yahoo last night using the Stokastic projections there. So he says, thanks, Stokastic. Sotex, thank you for the shout out. And congrats on a second place GPP finish. That's good shit right there. Then Olrat 14 wants to know, can you give me 2 bets for tonight that will win? Oh, okay. 2 bets for today that will win.
Can we get props for the frickin' Golden State Warriors? What are books afraid of? They're afraid they're going to like show a number out too much and it gets bet into place too quickly for like what we expect from Moses Moody. Like I'm sick of this shit. If books are going to be this cowardice, I'm going to open a sports book and I'm going to start posting lines and I'm going to start being able to figure out how to get money out of it a lot faster than some of these idiots that are out here posting. Like we at least got Brandon Pajemski posted over on FanDuel, but from my understanding, we still don't have Moses Moody. What are you waiting for, you cowards, you absolute heathens? Come on now.
They're waiting for the starting lineup is what they're waiting for.
Yeah, but there's different reactions of how any starting lineup, like yesterday, you could have done that with Alex Sarr, Jonas Valanciunas, if you really wanted to go there. Like, open up a number. Like, what would you open the points prop? I can tell you how many points I have Moses Moody for, and you're not going to believe the number, but yeah, it is what it is. Where would you open the number for Moses Moody?
For just points?
Points. -110 both sides, or -120, plus 100, however you want to open it. What would be your opening line of Moses Moody?
13.5?
Yeah, that seems perfect. 13.5. I'd go -120 on the over. I'd go even money on the under. And let people decide how it's going to roll out. And then when you get the starting lineup, go ahead and rip it off the board and then make some decisions after the fact. I don't get why this is so hard for books to do. What are they worried about in these situations? Open a damn number.
Well, we don't have any now, but what we can give Olrat 14 is bets from some of the other games. And also, if you aren't checking out Olrat, I've been doing threads. I'm doing like a fun bankroll challenge on Twitter where I post a lot of bets from the portfolio EV tools that we have over at Odd Shopper. And I'll tell you, these are currently the 2 top bets in portfolio EV. We've got Anthony Edwards under 5.5 assists over on FanDuel. That's a plus EV option, as well as Nikola Jokic under 12.5 rebounds over at DraftKings. Those are the top 2 bets that we have over at the Odd Shopper portfolio EV tool. So those are a couple of bets that I recommend taking a stab on. Do you have any other in particular bets here for Olrat 14 tonight, Eric?
Yeah, I have Minnesota -4. They're now at 5. Don't know if that necessarily helps you. I probably wouldn't want to be doing anything else here at 5. Not because I thought there were going to be any minutes. I just thought there was a rest advantage for Minnesota. If you go 3 points for home court, whatever, it made sense to be laying the 4 yesterday. So that's sitting at 5. Oh, Clowney is starting. Holy shit.
All right, so here we got the starting lineup for the New York Nets, which, the Brooklyn Nets, which is not going to be including Ben Simmons because he's resting today. Here's the direction the Nets decide to go with their starting lineup. Dennis Schroeder at point guard, Cam Thomas, Cam Johnson, so both the Cams, nothing unexpected there. Dorian Finney-Smith, and we've got Clowney starting at center. So there's lots of different ways they could have gone with this, Eric. What do you make of Clowney starting at center?
I think they still want to be limiting to some extent. I know they had said, we're going to raise his minutes up, Nicholas Claxton. Then they played a competitive-ish game against Milwaukee, and he only played 22 minutes. So I think for me, this is just like looking at the starting lineup. They probably want Claxton to close in the event that this game is close. So they're putting Clowney out there to start. But the power forward eligibility is a big deal here for Clowney. He's somebody who got picked up for his team option. They obviously like him for Brooklyn, somebody that they still are pretty bullish on. A young player, shown some upside at times last season. But Noah Clowney, 3,900 power forward eligibility. That's pretty useful on today's slate on DraftKings.
One thing that is a little bit annoying to me, I had a pretty big overweight stance to Noah Clowney. He was going to be a contrarian play that I wanted to talk about in a little bit. And now he's not going to be contrarian anymore. Slate starts in 28 minutes, so maybe he'll be lesser owned than he otherwise would have been. But Noah Clowney, who is cheap on FanDuel, he's cheap on DraftKings. He was projected for single-digit ownership. That's not going to be the case anymore. I already liked him as a contrarian option. I'm going to like him still, just not as a contrarian option anymore.
Yeah, because he's not going to be contrarian. You're going to like him as a chalk option more than likely. 3,900. Here's the thing, is that if he ends up getting into like really, really popular territory, there's still nothing that could change my opinion. I still think Moses Moody 3,600, like amongst the sub 4K pieces, I like Moses Moody irrationally more, but obviously different positionality. Power forward's an interesting one. There's nothing really all that expensive on DK. We have some mid-range options that are pulling some ownership. We have both the Denver guys. Their minutes are up because they have absolutely no bench. PJ Washington, he's up a tiny bit, but obviously can knock down some corner threes. We've seen that against Minnesota, even going back to the playoff series last season. But he falls at a price point at 3,900 where if you put him in for 24 minutes, you're going to get tons of him. So like, even if he doesn't close, if he's just splitting the center minutes with Claxton, he's still going to look like an awesome option considering Claxton's at 6,100.
All right, so we should have projections updates coming pretty shortly here. So we'll give you guys updates on that when they come across. Before then, though, let's answer a couple more of these super chats that are here, and then I'll go into Discord to see what Discord questions we have. But Phil Senzig wants to know, who puts it in the basket, Eric? Lotion play of the night.
Wait, hang on. Javier Hernandez, he was going to start obviously, though? No, Noah Claxton starting was not obvious as a thing. What are we talking about?
Yeah, Noah Clowney starting wasn't obvious. It was a possibility. It wasn't obvious, though.
Yeah, what are we doing here? Also, fuck that picture. I hate it so much, Jordan Klein.
We need to push this picture if we want to be the sexiest podcast host in 2025. Who's the lotion play of the night?
So annoying. You know what? I'm going to make the lotion play of the night Moses Moody. Screw it. I know he's the most popular player right now. I don't really care. When Moses Moody's points prop drops, everybody collectively hold hands and bet the over. I don't care. There's no way it's going to open at 13.5, 14.5. I just don't see it. I see 12.5 coming. I see 10.5 coming if he doesn't start. Just bet Moses Moody overs with me. That is going to be the lotion play of the night.
So there's a lot of value on this slate relative to it being a 4-gamer. And we've got Moses Moody as an option. We've got Noah Clowney as an option now too. I like Nikola Jokic as the lotion play here. It is not going to be all that difficult to spend up for him. And I do think a question that's going to be on people's minds is, who is our preferred spend up option on the slate? Is it Nikola Jokic? Is it Luka Doncic? For me, with there being a little bit more value amongst the guards, my preferred spend up option is going to be to pay up at center, especially on DraftKings. We can fit 2 centers in. I'm getting to more of Nikola Jokic than I am to Luka Doncic. Is Jokic also your preferred spend up option on the slate, Eric?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Luka's at 11-5 against a really good defense. I know that he eviscerated us during the playoffs last year, but there are so many scenarios where he doesn't play 40 minutes. Like most of the scenarios, I would say, where he doesn't play 40 minutes, it would take either overtime or, considering they didn't really have to push him 33 minutes, didn't really have to go out and chuck a lot. He was 5 for 22, 1 for 9 for 3, but this is obviously a spot where Luka could, of course, go off, but 1 for 1. I mean, we're getting Jokic for $200 less. They finally got off the schneid yesterday, but still, they're kind of fighting an uphill battle this entire season because of that bench. I do expect this bench for Denver to be a little bit more active. I don't think it matters as much for DFS purposes today because we have so much value on the Golden State side of things, and now Nicholas Claxton added to the grouping, or not Nicholas Claxton, what's his face? Noah Clowney added to the fray, but I look at Jokic as just if you have money for it, you get to him, you prioritize him over Luka. He's projected way better here at Stokastic. He's projected way better across the industry, north of 60 fantasy points. They need him on the floor, Nikola Jokic.
And we've got another super chat here from Price Productions. This is a good one. He says, won the NFL 5-5-5 last night by 7 points. And then he says, thanks to me. And also thanks to Matt Gajewski, who's doing the show with me last night. I hadn't done a show with Gajewski for a minute, but we're doing the NFL Showdown show last night. But yeah, shout out to Price Productions. That's good shit. Won the 5-5-5 last night by 7 points relative to a showdown. That's a pretty sweat-free win. So shout out to Price Productions. Absolutely love to see that. And then Ben P says he needs a bet for the $93 DK bonus bet from the King of the Court, but he says it cannot be Denver. I kind of like the Golden State Warriors money line for today. I have the fair line projection as I think the Warriors should be favored today, and they're slight underdogs. There's so much more depth on the Golden State side than there is on the Pelican side. And it's kind of something that I didn't really take a lot of note of until I started handicapping some of these games on my own. But some of these players could really matter on the end of the bench, Eric, or even just some role players who are playing prominent roles. When you have guys like Daniel Tice, Misi in the Pelicans rotation, like these are massively negative players. that just don't exist in the Warriors rotation. Even with Steph Curry out, there are a lot of good players. This team is deep. Like Gary Payton's going to be one of the last guys off the bench for them. And he's a really, really solid role player. So I actually like the Warriors money line for that Ben P. Is there anything that you would add as a DraftKings specific bet for his bonus, Eric?
No, I think that sounds perfect.
All right. So yeah, good luck with that, Ben. And once again, shout out to Price Productions. Let's go into Discord and see what questions we're getting for tonight's slate. First one here is from Einstein. He wants to know Keegan Murray or Michael Porter Jr. Also thoughts on Lauri Markkanen for today. Keegan Murray or Michael Porter Jr., do you have a preference between the two? It's pretty clearly MPJ for me personally.
Michael Porter Jr.
Yeah, MPJ for me. Then thoughts on Lauri Markkanen. Just a guy for me. I have him in a little bit under 20% of lineups, and that's where the field's at as well. Like, good option, but I'm not like jamming him into lineups or anything.
Yeah, I will say he hasn't shot the ball particularly well to start off this season. The last 2 games, 4 for 17, 4 for 15 from the floor. So there's a ceiling there. But the problem is that he's taking on Sacramento as a home dog ever so slightly, and we really, really, really need some scoring output from him. And his price went up $300 just because. Like, it wasn't because of performance the last 2 games. Again, made no sense for him to go from 4 for 17, 4 for 15, 27.5, 32.25 fantasy points to all of a sudden being 8K, which is a little weird to me.
Yeah.
Holy crap. We just got Cam Robinson from the Jaguars. Let's go. That is a huge acquisition. Because we got Darrisaw. Sorry, that's football. Nobody cares.
Yeah. We've only got 20 minutes left here.
Go.
Lots of questions. Focus on this, Eric. Matt Martin wants to know who's the best pay up option lineups without Jokic. So if you're paying up for somebody who isn't Jokic, what direction do you like going in?
Like, that is the guy. Let me sort it by my most exposed up here. Domantas Sabonis, I think, is fine at 9,300 over on DK. I find Luka to be a little bit more appealing if you're going to try to force it in over on FanDuel, although he's not really pulling ownership on either site. We got to think with Klay Thompson out there. I mean, that is going to be some scoring output that is going to reduce on the Luka side of things. That's 12, 14 shots a game that are going to go to somebody else on the floor. Whereas who was really filling those minutes last year? I mean, Tim Hardaway Jr. got sent to the shadow realm. They had gone to some rotations, I guess Hardy at times, but like for the most part, like Luka's going to be a hard guy to project for like 60 at any point this season without one of Kyrie or Klay Thompson out here going forward. It's just, I don't know. It's just a lot of usage to give up. And when you're talking about 3.5 points per 3-pointer that you're getting from a fantasy score perspective on DK, he's just not going to look as appealing. So yeah, Jokic by a landslide, then Domantas Sabonis. I think for both sites, you get the power forward eligibility over on FanDuel, which is useful, although he's a little bit over-owned over there relative to what we have his success being. I think Anthony Edwards is just an interesting tournament option. We've seen that ownership come down a little bit on both sites throughout the day. I'm looking at he's pretty popular, just shooting guard small forward on FanDuel, but on DK specifically, 8,900, 26%. And he hasn't had like the, oh yeah, there it is game yet. And because of that, I think we could see the ownership come in sneaky low for Ant for a guy who has 60-point upside.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're not playing Jokic, if it has to be another pay up option, it kind of becomes Luka by default. But to me, I think the actual answer is if you aren't going to have a lineup with Jokic, it's probably just a little bit more of a balanced build, right? Maybe you don't have Moses Moody in the lineup and you focus on like Kuminga and Buddy Hield instead. I think that's the way you go with non-Jokic lines. Just build them balanced because there's only really 2 super expensive guys on the slate. It's either Jokic or Doncic. Jokic, like you said, he's the guy. I agree with you, Eric. He projects way better for us. There's like a 5 fantasy point gap between them. So you're either paying up for Jokic or I think you just make those lineups a little bit more balanced.
Perfect.
How much of Luka do you have?
On FanDuel, I have 12%, and on DK, I have 0.
Yeah, it's right around 10% for me on both sites.
I have 0 on DK. Maybe I'll get to like 1 share before we finish.
All right, pull it up. Go just sort by Clowney, Jordan. And we'll do it for DraftKings and FanDuel. Just do just type in Clowney. All right, so 18%. And what site are you looking at? Is that FanDuel or DraftKings? Okay, DraftKings. And now let's check the FanDuel ownership. Same deal. Clowney, 22%. All right, so he's popular, like somewhat popular, but this isn't what I was expecting. I thought he was going to be like 30 to 40% owned.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people in chat talking about him having a foul problem. I remember that game during Summer League. He had a bajillion fouls. I think there's no foul limit from what I remember over in Summer League. And so he just 10. It's 10. Yeah, that's not even real. He had like 9 in 26 minutes.
Fouls. And you still see big men foul out.
Let me check his actual foul rate, because that's something I think you can look at that over in add more funds on Wowie. Let me see. Let me see his fouls. Here we go. So he had personal fouls, Clowney last season. Doesn't look like anything noticeable, if we're being honest. He had 7 personal fouls in 424 minutes last year. That is not very many over the course of the last calendar year, that is. So that is bringing in a couple of minutes here from this season. But yeah, 424 minutes, 7 personal fouls. That is not very many.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't look too much into Summer League foul rates, especially when you consider that I think that's the numbers. They're allowed 10 fouls. Guys are going to be way more liberal about how aggressive they are in games when you're allotted 8 or 10 fouls or whatever the number is.
Yeah, Draymond would use all 10. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, Draymond would ask if he gets extra technical fouls. He's like, wait, I get 4 technical fouls in Summer League?
Hell yeah, brother.
The only reason he plays in Summer League is just so he can go out there and commit some more technical fouls, yell at some refs, maybe punch some teammates. He'll make use of all the extra allowances that he gets there. But yeah, I wouldn't read too much into it for Summer League. We saw Clowney start a little bit last year for the Nets, and he put up some good fantasy performances. But most importantly, it's a 4-game slate. He's 3,900 on DraftKings, 4,000 on FanDuel. He's not going to be my most rostered player on the slate, but will be one of my most rostered players. I'm rerunning everything right now. I'll guess that he shows up in like 40-ish% of lineups or something like that for me, Eric.
Sounds about right.
But I'll know shortly. I'm kicking off a FanDuel sim right now. And then
Go ahead. What do you want to say, Jordan? I've heard you mumble 4 times in the mic. Go. 32% of the time for Noah Clowney. Awesome.
There we go.
FanDuel
line is on it.
Look at that. Awesome job. Thank you for speaking up. Use your voice.
Next question.
Vote next week.
Here it is from Mr. Cool Cam wants to know favorite player at each position on FanDuel. I'm running a sim and I'm going to know in like 30 seconds, and then we'll circle back to this and answer it. Rabasha wants to know any love for Keontae George as a swap off of Colin Sexton. I do like Keontae George tonight, Eric.
Yeah, as a contrarian piece, Keontae George played 36 minutes against Dallas, ended up being like the main featured piece, and he didn't even shoot it all that well. Keontae George can fill up a box score. Plus, Jordan Clarkson, I think we're just going to see him play mid-20s minutes all season. There were times last year you'd see him pushed into the 30s if he was shooting exponentially well. I don't really think we see that this year. Clarkson, I'd be surprised if he was on Utah by year end. I'd be surprised if we saw Lauri Markkanen on Utah comes year end. Like, they have to know how bad this basketball team is as it's currently constructed. And if anybody wants John Collins, I'd be shocked. But for sure, they'll want Jordan Clarkson off the bench. They'll want Lauri Markkanen as a starter come playoff time.
And I can now answer the question about most rostered players over on FanDuel. How are you doing on updating lineups and whatnot, Eric?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm chilling.
Okay. Just making sure. So I just uploaded the FanDuel lineups, DraftKings lineups. Those are to be updated next for myself. Here's who I got to at most exposure for each position over on FanDuel, Mr. Cool Cam. Point guard for me, that is De'Aaron Fox. At shooting guard for me, that is Colin Sexton. At small forward for me, that is Cameron Johnson. At power forward for me, that is the aforementioned Noah Clowney. And then at center for me, that is Nikola Jokic over on FanDuel. So those are my most rostered players at each position over on FanDuel. And then DraftKings I'll know in a few minutes here as well. Next question, it is from M. Grizzly. He wants to know, how are we handling the Warriors game as far as ROI boosts go? You making any kind of specific adjustments in the Sims, Eric?
No. I did the projections boost maybe a tiny bit on a couple of guys, specifically Pajemski on FanDuel, and then Moses Moody, I just like way more on DK. He's going to be like a lock button play for me over there at 3,600. So if I've done anything, it's just 2 slight projection changes that when the Sims then run, have them showing up in the number of lineups I was kind of hoping for a little bit more.
Next question. Yeah. And M Grizzly, Eric and I talked about this a little bit at the top, and nothing has changed for me on that standpoint. I don't know exactly what the Warriors lineup is going to be, but I have so much exposure to the Warriors as a team that whatever it is, I have the flexibility to maneuver. I don't have to make any changes before the slate starts to prepare for it. It's whatever the lineup is. I haven't looked through like all of my lineups individually, but I imagine I have at least a couple of Warriors players in every single lineup, Eric, which is going to make it really easy to make swaps and have the flexibility in lineups to make swaps whenever that starting lineup comes out. It's probably the same for yourself.
Yeah, if you want, you can filter lineups to just make sure that it has 3 Golden State Warriors, but those are all going to be like the highest ROI lineups anyway, as I'm just going through and favoriting a couple of them and using the entry manager, which if you're not using yet, you're kind of crazy. It's especially useful, I think, on FanDuel DK. It's pretty easy to kind of swap things back and forth. FanDuel, it's so much easier for me to just take that CSV, like move it over, put it into the choose file, and then upload it on FanDuel. So yeah, I'm just kind of tweaking everything over there at the moment.
And now the next question that we have here, it is from Stokes. Wants to know any love for Luka. No, not really. I love Jokic. Luka showing up in some lineups for me. Actually, Clowney being available got me to a little bit more Luka, but certainly not somebody I love for today.
Don't love him at all.
And then the next question, it is from Blinky. He wants to know for FanDuel GPP, PJ Clowney, Trace Jackson Davis at power forward, who gets left behind? Does he mean PJ Washington?
I guess so. I mean, PJ Washington shot the ball very well. Not yesterday. I mean, shit, he just found ways to fill it up. 6 stocks will do that for you. I just knew he put up over 40 fantasy points. PJ Washington, 0 for 4 from 3. You can't expect 6 stocks. I mean, the guy averages like 1-1, if that, even though he's like a defensive stopper and was playing 40 minutes in the postseason last season. So like, it's hard for me to prioritize PJ Washington with an outlier stocks performance like that.
Yeah, I don't really have much exposure to PJ Washington. Trace Jackson Davis and Noah Clowney are much better value options to me, but they're also much cheaper. I mean, you're talking about a guy here like Noah Clowney's 4K on FanDuel and PJ Washington is $5,200 or $5,300 off the top of my head. But yeah, Clowney and Trace Jackson Davis, higher priorities than PJ Washington for me. So if it's one of them has to go, it's PJ Washington. JEW wants to know, who are the must plays for DK single entry from the early games, Eric? Who are the most important players to you from the 7:30 games? That's certainly Noah Clowney for me.
Yeah, Noah Clowney now. That has changed. I think Dennis Schroeder is still a good option. Without Ben Simmons out on the floor, we got to expect the ball is going to be going straight through him. Number of shooters that he has around him, be it Cam Johnson, Cam Thomas, guys, maybe not the best shooters, but guys who are willingly shooting. And Cameron Johnson, once upon a time in Phoenix, definitely had that element to him. Dorian Finney-Smith a little bit at times in his career. And then getting a guy like Noah Clowney out there instead of Nicholas Claxton, I mean, there's going to be some open, like Noah Clowney's happy to fire 3-pointers. From what I've seen from limited Brooklyn games over the course of this season, he shoots more threes than what I would expect out of like a big like center type like him. He's pretty scraggly. He's definitely out there chucking. Let me see. 15 3-pointers attempted through 3 games. So yeah, he's averaging 5 per. And that's in like 15, 16, 21 minutes. If you take him up to 24, his expectation of like 5.5 threes, I don't know. That seems like a pretty good play to be pairing together with it. I like the Schroeder side. His assists have to look, I mean, not better because Claxton's going to be playing so close to the rim and that's going to be more of your finisher, but Clowney's definitely going to be a willing shooter as well.
Yeah. Overall, it's Clowney for me. I like Schroeder a lot too, but just the way that he framed it as who are the must plays.
Yeah.
I would say Jokic if you're looking for a pay up option, Clowney for value, Schroeder strong consideration, but probably not something I would consider a must play. Next question is from Zach Attack. He says, Klay Thompson only projecting for 1% ownership on FanDuel. Do we like him in a GPP over somebody like Buddy Hield? I'm going to have a lot more exposure to Buddy Hield, but if it's just for contrarian purposes to get exposure to somebody else, then yeah, you could look at Klay, but like in the grand scheme of things, I don't like Klay all that much for this slate.
I don't either.
Yeah, not somebody who I really am finding myself on all that much. And then we've got a question here from Capanicella. He wants to know nuke of the night. So actually, Jordan, we're running out of time here just because so much has happened. So don't even run the animation because we need every second that we could spare here. But let's do this quick, Eric. Who is the nuke of the night? Who is the GPP play that is most important to your lineups right now?
Not most important to my lineups, but my favorite relative to ownership, Kevon Looney on TK.
Okay. For me, it's Noah Clowney now. I am like he came in with not nearly the ownership projection that I thought he was going to when we first found out. If we're going to be getting Noah Clowney right around 20% ownership at a cheap price point, both DraftKings and FanDuel as a starter, which is certainly possible. We get a little bit more public money, especially while there's the NFL overlap. There's Monday Night Football yesterday, considering that's a Tuesday. So maybe we do get kind of modest ownership on Noah Clowney. And if that is going to be the case, he is somebody who I want to be well overweight to the field too. So Noah Clowney, he is going to be my nuke of the night. Next question is from Einsteinem. He wants to know, do we have any interest in Mike Conley? Mike Conley from your Timberwolves, Eric. Are you getting to Mike Conley?
No.
Yeah, he is not somebody who's going to be important for me on this slate either. Now we've got a super chat here. This one is from, we got a few ones here. Jay says he has a feeling that Zion is going to break the slate. I like Zion as well as like an upper kind of pay up option. I don't know exactly what his minutes are going to be, but that's kind of they've been cautious with him so far, which makes sense considering his injury history, the start of the year. He was sick to open the season as well. Zion's been awesome when he's been on the court this year. And also he was really good at the tail end of last year. So I'm starting to wonder, somebody who you and I have talked a lot about in the past about Zion being a consistent performer, but not really a high upside GPP guy. I wonder if that might change this year. He's looked really good. He's rebounding the ball. He's assisting. I think not playing with the center as much has helped out there. I like Zion as a GPP option, Eric.
I think he's one of the best GPP plays on the slate. They only played 28 minutes. They got blown out by Portland, which is not ideal, lost by like 22, but he played 29 in his first outing. I put him in for 31 the next game. I have him in for 32 and a half minutes, and he looks awesome relative to ownership.
Yeah, I'm on board with Zion. I think he might be onto something there, Jay. I'm with you. I like Zion as well. Let's see. Next question here. It is from Connor. He wants to know, who are the locks for cash games? Moses Moody, Noah Clowney, Dennis Schroeder, Buddy Hield.
Brandon Pajemski.
Okay, we could add Pajemski to the mix. Yeah, I think those are the guys. I wouldn't add anybody else as a lock for cash games, would you?
No. Jokic probably because you have the salary for it.
Yeah, he was on my list though.
Okay, I didn't hear that one.
Yeah, just because especially now that Clowney's in the mix and Clowney has the power forward eligibility. Yeah, it makes sense to get to Jokic in cash games as well as GPPs. Austin Tilley, even with the value, why is the Luka and Jokic gap so wide? Okay, so the value actually doesn't really play as much of a part in this, as much as Luka has to share the ball with Klay Thompson, who's taking a lot of shots this year. Eric talked about that, how you got Klay Thompson instead of Tim Hardaway Jr. That's extra usage to another piece on the team, as well as Kyrie being in the mix. The Denver Nuggets do not have a great roster this year. Their big free agent acquisition was Russell Westbrook, which has already been a disaster and is going to continue to be one. Jokic has to do a lot for this team. Luka has other pieces he could kind of defer to at times. So we just have Jokic projected way higher, and that's what's setting them apart in the amount of lineups they're showing up in.
Perfectly said.
Darren Unger says for a FanDuel, it's a 2v2, Aaron Gordon and Anthony Edwards, or Cam Johnson and Domantas Sabonis. Cam Johnson and Domantas Sabonis for me.
Yep, same.
Cedric Phillips, our guy Cedric.
What's up,
Shout out to
Ced?
Cedric, one of the good guys on Twitter. Says on FanDuel, Colin Sexton and Herb Jones versus Jordan Clarkson / Keontae George plus Trace Jackson Davis. Yeah, of those combinations, I like Keontae George and Trace Jackson Davis.
Yep, second one for me too, pretty easily.
And then Avi Schreier wants to know, can we rank DeRozan, Markkanen, and Ingram? That is probably the worst spelling of Ingram I've ever seen in my entire life. I've never seen Brandon Ingram's name spelled with that many A's and an H in it before. But that aside,
Cody Williams starting
for Taylor Hendricks. All right, that was actually something that Josh was on. We were on our projections call before. He had pointed out that he thought Cody Williams was going to start. So we're good on that. Wow. Anyway, Abby Schreier wants to know, can we rank DeRozan, Markkanen, and Ingram for FanDuel? Yeah, let me pull up my exposures for FanDuel. All right. Markkanen, or as he spells it, Ingraham.
Captain Ingram had many sons.
DeRozan, Markkanen, Ingram. Oh, okay. So
for all my Bible people
of
out
these
there.
guys, it is going to be number 1 for me is Markkanen. Number 2 is Ingram. And then 3 is DeRozan. That's the order I'm going there.
Sounds perfect.
And we are caught up on super chats. I don't think there's any questions waiting for us in Discord. So really quick, Eric, what are your thoughts on Cody Williams starting for the Utah Jazz? Which the main implication here means that John Collins is not starting. We knew Taylor Hendricks was going to be starting today. That much was very apparent. So Cody Williams starting in his place. What are your initial thoughts to that?
Yeah, you need 2 legs to play basketball, I think. And, well, it's a bummer. That was one of the worst injuries I've seen in a while. But I am happy because I'd want to have John Collins and potential benching. This is pretty easy for me. You can get to a little Cody Williams. I'm not going to be doing a lot with him. 3,700 on FanDuel. That's at least useful. On DK, he's 3,700 less appealing.
Yeah, I mean, Cody Williams, we were already projecting Cody Williams to start, if I'm not mistaken, based on the projections call that we had before. So, like, it doesn't change anything for me at all.
Yeah, on FanDuel, it's at least one of those things that you look at now and you can at least say, all right, I understand what is going on here with this. Let me make sure I got my Clowney in there. Okay. Yep, Noah Clowney. Oh, yep, feel good about these FanDuel lineups. Feel good about everything, actually, which is famous last words.
Yeah, and also part of this news, Taylor Hendricks has been confirmed that he will not return this season. So no Taylor Hendricks for the rest of the year. It looks like Cody Williams, at least for now, is going to be starting in his place. But I don't know. It's hard for me to really go out and project Cody Williams to do a ton. If you look at what we do know about Cody Williams, which is not all that much, he is averaging less than half a fantasy point per game this year, Eric. And now he's going to be playing with starters where he is assumed to be having less usage.
Yeah, he's a pretty interesting young piece. I mean, he's like 19 years old. His brother is Jalen Williams. So, I mean, that's pretty good genetics right there. I looked into him a little bit, but yeah, I knew there wasn't really going to be a lot of chance that I was going to be playing him a ton other than on FanDuel. I had a little bit. I think I have like 4% of him on FanDuel, but on DK, 3,700, I prefer all of those Golden State pieces.
All right, that is going to do it for Eric and myself over here on YouTube. But Josh and I are about to head on over to Playback. We're going to watch the games together. And then after us, it's finally happening. The debut of the post-lock show. We've got Eitan coming on. Eitan's going to have at least one guest with him. We'll leave it a mystery for now as to who the guests are going to be for the show. So over on Playback, come and jump in, watch the games with Josh and I, and then stick around even more after that because we're going to be going all night watching games over on Playback. So come check us out there. Jordan, spam the YouTube chat with the Playback link so we can get people over there. Click on that. Come watch the games with us. Hope to see you guys in there. Good luck. Have a good night.